You tell yourself you are being efficient. You tell yourself you are saving time. You tell yourself this is productivity. It isn't. It is avoidance dressed up as intelligence. The human brain is wired to conserve energy. That is not a flaw. It is a survival feature. Neuroscience has shown this repeatedly. When the brain detects an easier path that appears to produce the same outcome, it takes it automatically, without debate. That's the key. ChatGPT feels like relief, not because it makes you better, but because it removes effort. And effort is uncomfortable. Effort requires uncertainty. Effort forces you to commit to a thought before you know if it is right. So your brain chooses relief. Convenience feels like progress, but it is often avoidance. This is not opinion. This is documented behavior. Cognitive effort studies show that humans routinely choose external aids, even when those aids reduce long-term learning and performance. Psychologists call this cognitive offloading. When you offload thinking, the brain does less of it. Not temporarily, permanently. You have a choice. But most people never realize a choice was made. They open ChatGPT to write an email, then to reword a message, then to explain something they already understand, then to decide what to say, then to decide what to think. And slowly, quietly, something changes. Confidence erodes, not dramatically, not overnight, but reliably. The research is clear. When people rely on external systems to generate or structure information, their sense of authorship weakens. Their recall weakens. Their judgment weakens. A well-known body of research on memory and external information storage shows that when information is easily accessible elsewhere, the brain encodes it less deeply. This is sometimes referred to as the Google effect. But ChatGPT goes further. Google still required effort. Searching, evaluating, choosing. ChatGPT removes even that friction. It hands you coherence without struggle, language without ownership, conclusions without responsibility. Convenience feels like progress, but it is often avoidance. Look at the real-world behavior. People no longer trust their own emails. They ask an AI to make it sound better. Better than what? Better than their own voice. That's the quiet admission. They hesitate before replying without assistance. They feel exposed writing alone. They reread their own words and feel unsure. This is not because they became worse writers. It's because they stopped practicing judgment. Neuroplasticity research is blunt about this. The brain strengthens what you repeatedly do and weakens what you repeatedly avoid. If you avoid structuring thoughts, the neural pathways responsible for structuring thoughts weaken. That's the key. You don't lose intelligence, you lose readiness. You don't lose ability, you lose initiative. And you mistake that loss for efficiency. Convenience feels like progress, but it is often avoidance. Here's the illusion that traps people. They say, I could do this myself. I just don't need to. That sentence sounds empowering. It isn't. Psychological studies on learned dependence show that perceived ability without execution fades rapidly. Confidence is not stored. It is expressed or it decays. You don't keep confidence by knowing you could act. You keep confidence by acting. You don't need their permission. Every time you reach for ChatGPT before forming your own thought, you train your brain to wait. You teach it that effort is optional. You teach it that clarity comes from outside, and the brain listens. Decision-making research shows that when individuals rely on external recommendations, even accurate ones, they become less decisive over time. They hesitate more. They defer more. They doubt their internal signals. That's the cost. Not wrong answers, not bad output, erosion. Convenience feels like progress, but it is often avoidance. Let's talk about productivity honestly. Productivity is not speed. Productivity is not polish. Productivity is not frictionless output. Productivity is the ability to act without permission. When you outsource the first draft of your thinking, you outsource authority. And authority does not return automatically. It must be reclaimed. You have a choice, and the choice is smaller than you think. The instruction is simple, not easy, simple. Before you open ChatGPT, you must produce something yourself. Anything. A messy paragraph, a rough decision, an imperfect explanation. That's the key. You don't need to be right, you need to be first. Neuroscience shows that effortful retrieval strengthens memory and confidence far more than passive exposure. When you generate before you compare, the brain engages deeply. When you compare before you generate, the brain disengages. So the rule is this: generate first, refine later. Never reverse the order. You don't need their permission. If you can't explain something without assistance, you don't understand it yet. That is not shame. That is information. Avoidance hides that information. Discipline reveals it. It's not about efficiency. It's about discipline. This chapter is not asking you to reject tools. It is asking you to reject substitution. A tool extends effort. A substitute replaces it. ChatGPT becomes a substitute the moment it removes struggle from the beginning of thought. Convenience feels like progress, but it is often avoidance. If this makes you uncomfortable, that's the signal. That discomfort is not danger. It is reactivation, the brain waking back up to its role. You have a choice. You can continue to feel productive while becoming hesitant, or you can feel slower while becoming decisive. One path flatters you, the other rebuilds you. That's the key. This chapter exposed the illusion of efficiency, but avoidance is only the surface problem. Beneath it is something deeper, something structural. If offloading effort weakens thinking, what happens when offloading becomes automatic? You mastered the illusion of productivity. Now let's expose the real cost. Chapter 2. Cognitive offloading shrinks the mind. Settle your attention here. Nothing to do right now except listen, nothing to solve, just notice. Your mind is very good at conserving energy. It always has been. That is not a weakness. That is design. In cognitive science, this principle appears again and again. When effort can be reduced without immediate consequence, the brain reduces effort, calmly, automatically, without argument. That's the key. This is where cognitive offloading begins. Cognitive offloading is the act of placing mental work outside the mind. Writing reminders, using calculators, searching instead of recalling, and now asking ChatGPT instead of thinking. Research on memory and learning has demonstrated something consistent. When information is easily retrievable from an external source, the brain encodes it less deeply. This phenomenon is often referred to as the Google effect. Studies by Sparrow, Liu, and Wegner showed that people remember where information is stored rather than the information itself when they expect future access. If you do not retrieve it, you do not retain it. The brain adapts to expectations. If it expects access, it stops storing. If it expects effort, it builds structure. You have a choice. Before AI, external retrieval still required effort. You had to search, you had to read, you had to evaluate, you had to decide. Those steps mattered. They activated memory networks. They strengthened recall pathways. ChatGPT removes those steps. No search, no evaluation, no structure, just an answer. That's the acceleration. If you do not retrieve it, you do not retain it. Neuroscience tells us that memory is not a recording device. It is a reconstruction system. Each time you retrieve information, you strengthen it. Each time you avoid retrieval, the pathway weakens. This is called retrieval-based learning. It is one of the most robust findings in cognitive psychology. So when you ask ChatGPT to explain something you already half know, you are not reinforcing understanding. You are bypassing it calmly, repeatedly, consistently. That's the key. And here is the subtle cost. At first, nothing feels wrong. You feel informed, you feel fluent, you feel calm. But fluency is not memory. Ease is not mastery. People begin to notice something quietly. They hesitate when asked to explain things without assistance. Words feel just out of reach. Thoughts feel less anchored. This is not decline. It is disuse. If you do not retrieve it, you do not retain it. You don't need their permission. The brain responds to what you repeatedly ask of it. If you repeatedly ask it to wait while an external system provides structure, it learns waiting. Initiative fades. Retrieval slows. Confidence softens. Studies on metacognition show that people who rely heavily on external aids overestimate their understanding. They confuse recognition with recall. Seeing information feels like knowing it. But recognition does not prepare you for action. Recall does. That's the key. Now let's slow this down. Imagine information resting gently in your mind. When you reach for it yourself, neural pathways light up. When you don't, they dim. This is not punishment, it is efficiency. The brain prunes what it does not use. That process is called synaptic pruning. It is how learning becomes precise, but it cuts both ways. If you do not retrieve it, you do not retain it. ChatGPT accelerates pruning by removing retrieval demand altogether. You are not broken, you are adapting. An adaptation can be redirected. You have a choice. The transformation here is not dramatic, it is gentle, it is disciplined. One instruction. Before you look up an answer, pause. Before you ask, attempt recall. Even if you are wrong, that's the key. Research shows that failed retrieval attempts strengthen learning more than passive review. This is known as the pre-testing effect. Struggle, even brief struggle, primes the brain to encode more deeply. So the discomfort you avoid is the very signal that learning is happening. If you do not retrieve it, you do not retain it. You don't need their permission. Let your mind search itself first. Let it wander. Let it strain slightly. That strain is not stress, it is engagement. Then, and only then, compare. Never reverse the order. It's not about intelligence, it's about discipline. As this becomes habit, something shifts. Recall sharpens. Language returns. Confidence stabilizes. Not because you stopped using tools, but because you stopped replacing yourself. That's the key. This aligns quietly with ancient wisdom. Long before neuroscience, the principle was understood. Make it your aim to be found faithful. Faithful does not mean perfect. It means present. It means engaged. If you do not retrieve it, you do not retain it. Let this settle. You are not meant to carry everything externally. You are meant to practice remembering. You are meant to participate. This chapter was about memory, but memory is only the foundation. Because when memory weakens, judgment follows. You have begun restoring retrieval. Now it is time to reclaim trust in your own decisions. Rest here for a moment, then move forward. Chapter 3. Your brain learns what you repeatedly do. Take a slow breath here. Nothing to fix, nothing to prove. Just awareness. Your brain is not judging you. It is learning from you. Every moment it asks one quiet question. What is used? And then it strengthens that. What is avoided? And then it releases that. This process is called neuroplasticity. It is one of the most consistent findings in modern neuroscience. The brain changes according to use, not according to intention, not according to identity, according to repetition. That's the key. What you stop doing, your brain stops supporting. This is not dramatic, it is gentle, it is automatic. When you repeatedly think, the brain reinforces thinking networks. When you repeatedly decide, it reinforces decision circuits. When you repeatedly struggle through uncertainty, it reinforces resilience and judgment. And when you repeatedly hand those processes away, it weakens them. You have a choice. Neuroplasticity studies using functional MRI show that neural pathways strengthen with use and thin with disuse. This is not metaphor. This is structural change. Synapses that fire together wire together. Synapses that do not fire together disconnect. So when ChatGPT thinks for you, summarizes for you, decides for you, the brain does not say thank you. It says unnecessary. What you stop doing, your brain stops supporting. At first, the change feels like relief, less friction, less effort, less uncertainty. But the brain does not measure comfort. It measures frequency. If effort is removed repeatedly, effort circuits weaken. If initiation is bypassed repeatedly, initiation slows. This is not laziness. This is learning. You don't need their permission. Psychological research on learned passivity shows that when individuals are repeatedly relieved of cognitive responsibility, they become less likely to initiate action even when capable. This was observed long before AI and automation studies in decision support systems. ChatGPT accelerates this effect because it intervenes at the earliest stage. The moment before thought forms. That's the key. You are not becoming less intelligent. You are becoming less practiced. Intelligence unused does not disappear. It goes quiet. What you stop doing, your brain stops supporting. Let this land gently. The brain is efficient. If you do not ask it to choose words, it stops prioritizing word selection. If you do not ask it to evaluate ideas, it stops refining judgment. If you do not ask it to tolerate ambiguity, it stops preparing for it. And then one day you notice hesitation, not panic, just delay. You pause before writing. You pause before replying. You pause before deciding. And you tell yourself you are being careful. But underneath, the pattern is clear. It's not about ability. It's about discipline. You have a choice. Neuroscience also shows something hopeful. The same plasticity that weakens unused pathways strengthens them again when re-engaged. This is not recovery. It is reactivation. The instruction is simple. Do not outsource first contact. When a task appears, meet it yourself first. Even briefly. Even imperfectly. That's the key. Before summarizing, read and summarize aloud to yourself. Before deciding, state your decision silently. Before explaining, attempt explanation once. Then, and only then, use tools to refine. Never reverse the order. What you stop doing, your brain stops supporting. This applies everywhere. If you stop writing, writing fades. If you stop reasoning, reasoning softens. If you stop initiating, initiative slows. But when you return, gently, consistently, the brain follows. You don't need their permission. Behavioral studies on habit formation show that identity follows action, not the other way around. You do not wait to feel capable. You act, and capability returns. So stop asking, am I allowed to do this without help? You already are. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. There is no punishment here. There is no failure, only feedback. Your brain is saying, tell me what matters by what you repeat. What you stop doing, your brain stops supporting. Let the repetition become calm. Let effort return without drama. Let thinking feel slightly heavier at first. That weight is strength returning. Research on effort-based learning shows that moderate cognitive strain improves long-term performance and confidence. Ease feels good now. Effort builds capacity later. That's the key. There is a quiet wisdom that mirrors this truth. Train yourself for godliness. Training is not force. It is repetition. It is showing up again. This chapter was about practice, because practice determines structure, and structure determines trust. When you stop practicing judgment, trust erodes. When you practice it again, trust returns. You have a choice. You are not quitting a tool. You are retraining a brain. And now that you understand how repetition shapes you, there is one more illusion to dissolve. Because fluency can look like understanding, but they are not the same. Rest here, then move forward. Chapter 4. Fluency is not understanding. Settle into this moment. Let the pace slow. Let the words arrive without effort. There is something very soothing about fluent language. Smooth sentences, confident tone, clear structure. Your mind relaxes when it hears certainty. That response is natural. The brain is designed to conserve energy, and fluency signals safety. And that's the key. But cognitive psychology makes an important distinction. Recognition is not recall. Fluency is not understanding. Easy words feel true, even when they are not yours. Researchers have studied this for decades. In learning science, recognition refers to the ability to identify information when you see it. Recall is the ability to produce it from within. These are not equal skills. In fact, they rely on different neural processes. Recall requires deeper encoding and stronger memory traces. Recognition does not. ChatGPT is exceptionally fluent. That is its strength. And that fluency creates a powerful illusion. When language flows smoothly, the brain assumes comprehension has occurred. Psychologists call this the illusion of explanatory depth. People believe they understand something far better than they actually do until they are asked to explain it themselves. That's the key. Easy words feel true, even when they are not yours. Notice what happens when you read a beautifully written explanation generated by AI. Your mind nods along. There is relief. There is agreement. There is a sense of mastery. But that mastery has not been tested. It has not been retrieved. It has not been expressed. It has only been recognized. You have a choice. Studies in metacognition show that people routinely overestimate their understanding after reading fluent explanations. In experiments, participants who read clear, well-written summaries perform worse on later tests than those who struggled through less fluent material. The struggle mattered. The effort mattered. Understanding is not absorbed. It is built, but fluency hides that truth. Easy words feel true, even when they are not yours. ChatGPT accelerates this illusion by removing friction. There is no pause to think, no gap to fill, no moment where your own mind must wrestle with uncertainty. The answer arrives complete, polished, confident, and your brain says, I know this. But knowing requires recall. That's the key. Let this be gentle, not confrontational. You are not being deceived by intention. You are being guided by biology. The brain uses fluency as a shortcut. Cognitive ease feels like truth. This is known as processing fluency bias. Information that is easy to process is judged as more accurate, more trustworthy, and more familiar. So when the language is smooth, skepticism lowers. Easy words feel true, even when they are not yours. This is why people struggle later to explain what they understand. They recognize the answer when they see it again, but cannot generate it independently. That gap creates anxiety, hesitation, dependence. And dependence is quiet. You don't need their permission. The transformation here is simple and calm. When you read or hear something that feels clear, pause. Ask one question. Could I explain this without looking? That's the key. If the answer is no, understanding has not yet formed. That is not failure. That is feedback. Learning science shows that explanation is one of the most powerful tools for deep understanding. This is called the self-explanation effect. When learners explain concepts in their own words, comprehension increases dramatically. So the instruction is this: after consuming fluent information, close the source. Speak the idea aloud. Write it simply. Teach it to an empty room, even briefly. Easy words feel true, even when they are not yours. This practice restores ownership. It brings language back into your body. It turns recognition into recall. It transforms fluency into understanding. You have a choice. You can let smooth language pass through you, or you can make it work for you. It's not about intelligence, it's about discipline. ChatGPT does not rob you of understanding. It offers fluency too early, and timing matters. Fluency should come after effort, not before. When it comes first, it replaces the work your brain needs to do. When it comes after, it refines what you already own. That's the key. Let this settle quietly. Understanding feels different from fluency. It is slower, it is less polished, it includes uncertainty, but it is stable. It can be recalled under pressure. It can be explained without reference. Research on durable learning shows that desirable difficulties, effortful processing, retrieval, and explanation lead to stronger long-term retention and transfer. Ease feels good now. Understanding lasts. Easy words feel true even when they are not yours. There is a gentle wisdom that echoes this. Make it plain so that one may run who reads it. Plainness comes after clarity, not before. Truth can be spoken simply because it is known, not because it is smooth. You don't need their permission. This chapter was about illusion. The illusion that fluency equals mastery. When you dissolve that illusion, you regain humility. And humility restores learning. You have a choice. You can admire smooth answers, or you can build sturdy ones. And as understanding deepens, something else begins to shift. Confidence, judgment, the ability to choose without reassurance. Because once you stop mistaking fluency for understanding, you begin to notice something else quietly influencing you. External authority. Rest here for a moment, then move forward. Chapter 5. External authority replaces internal judgment. Let your breathing slow, not because you are tired, but because clarity arrives when the noise settles. There is a quiet shift that happens when you ask too often. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. At first, asking feels responsible. It feels careful. It feels wise. But the brain does not measure intention. It measures repetition. And repetition teaches it where authority lives. That's the key. The more you ask, the less you trust yourself. Decision-making research has shown this pattern again and again. When people rely on external systems to guide choices, even accurate systems, their confidence in personal judgment declines over time. This has been observed in studies on GPS navigation, decision support software, and automated recommendations. When the system is present, people defer. When it is removed, hesitation appears. Not because ability vanished, because trust did. You have a choice. ChatGPT does not announce itself as authority. It never needs to. It speaks calmly. It explains smoothly. It answers without hesitation, and the brain responds to certainty. Cognitive science tells us that humans are highly sensitive to confident language. Statements delivered fluently are perceived as more credible, even when the listener has equal or greater knowledge. This is called authority bias. We assign weight not based on truth, but on tone. That's the key. The more you ask, the less you trust yourself. Over time, ChatGPT becomes a silent reference point. You stop asking, "What do I think?" and start asking, "What does it say?" That shift is subtle. It feels like collaboration. It feels like support. But authority has moved. You don't need their permission. Judgment is not strengthened by comparison alone. It is strengthened by commitment. When you make a decision and live with it, neural circuits associated with confidence and evaluation strengthen. This is supported by neuroscience research on decision ownership. Ownership increases learning. Deference delays it. When decisions are repeatedly outsourced, ownership fades. The more you ask, the less you trust yourself. Let this feel gentle. You are not weak for seeking input. You are human. But when input becomes default, judgment becomes dormant. Studies on self-efficacy show that confidence grows when individuals act without reassurance and observe outcomes. Even imperfect outcomes strengthen agency. Constant reassurance interrupts that loop. That's the key. ChatGPT has no lived experience, no consequences, no stake. Yet its answers arrive without hesitation, and the brain mistakes that smoothness for wisdom. Easy certainty feels safe. Personal judgment feels risky. So the brain chooses safety. You have a choice. Notice the pattern. You ask before deciding. You ask before writing. You ask before responding. Soon, silence feels uncomfortable. Decision feels exposed. And you tell yourself you are being thorough. But underneath, something else is happening. It's not about intelligence. It's about discipline. The instruction here is simple. Decide first. Before you consult, commit internally. Say, "This is what I think." Even softly, even tentatively. That's the key. Then, and only then, seek comparison. Use tools to test judgment, not replace it. Never reverse the order. The more you ask, the less you trust yourself. This is not about rejecting information. It is about reclaiming authority. Behavioral research shows that people who generate an answer before seeing a correct one show greater confidence and better long-term accuracy. This is called generation-based learning. Judgment sharpens when exercised. You don't need their permission. Let your mind practice deciding again. Start small. Choose wording without assistance. Choose direction without reassurance. Choose timing without confirmation. Each choice strengthens internal reference. That's the key. As this practice settles in, something changes. The urge to ask softens. The pause before action shortens. Confidence returns quietly without announcement. Because confidence is not bravado, it is familiarity with choice. The more you ask, the less you trust yourself. Let that phrase become a signal, not a judgment. When you notice the urge to ask, pause, breathe, decide once, then move. This is how authority returns. There is an ancient echo to this truth. Each one should be fully convinced in their own mind. Conviction does not mean certainty, it means ownership. Let that settle. This chapter was about authority, because authority shapes behavior. When authority lives outside, dependence grows. When authority returns inside, clarity follows. You have a choice. You are not here to collect answers. You are here to build judgment. And now that judgment is waking up, there is one more cost to examine. Because when authority leaves the self, creativity follows it. Rest here for a moment, then continue. Chapter 6, Creativity Dies When Struggle is Removed. Settle into this moment. Let your breathing slow, nothing to force, nothing to prove. You are here to understand something simple and powerful. Struggle is not a flaw, it is the process. For years, you were taught the opposite. That ease is the goal. That friction is failure. That speed means talent. Neuroscience says otherwise. Creativity does not emerge from comfort. It emerges from effort, from constraint, from the tension between what you want to express and what you cannot yet say. That tension matters. Studies in cognitive neuroscience show that creative insight activates networks that require effortful engagement. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and decision-making, works alongside the default mode network, which handles imagination and internal simulation. These networks do not synchronize when the task is effortless. They synchronize when the brain is challenged. Struggle is not a flaw. It is the process. When you remove struggle, the brain goes idle. It consumes instead of creates. It selects instead of discovers. This is why friction matters. Constraints force the brain to search deeper. When options are limited, the mind stops scrolling and starts solving. Research on problem solving shows that constraints increase originality by forcing uncommon associations. In simple terms, fewer options create better ideas. Now breathe again. Think about what happens when struggle disappears entirely, when tools promise instant output, when tension is bypassed, the brain skips the work. And when the work is skipped, the learning is skipped too. You don't grow by receiving answers. You grow by wrestling with questions. Struggle is not a flaw, it is the process. This is not an argument against tools. It is an argument against replacement. When you outsource the hard part, you outsource the transformation. Neuroplasticity depends on effort. The brain physically rewires itself when you push through resistance. This is backed by decades of research on skill acquisition. Effort creates myelin. Myelin increases signal speed. Signal speed becomes mastery. No struggle, no rewiring. The brain cannot adapt to work it did not do. So when creative tension is bypassed, originality fades. Not because creativity is gone, but because the conditions that produce it were removed. Struggle is not a flaw. It is the process. Notice how this feels. Not harsh, not accusatory, just clear. You have a choice. You can choose comfort, or you can choose creation. Comfort feels good immediately. Creation feels meaningful later. Dopamine research shows this clearly. Instant rewards spike dopamine briefly, then crash. Effort-based rewards build steady motivation and long-term satisfaction. This is why easy output feels empty after a while. The brain knows it did not earn it, and the brain keeps score. Now let this sink in. Creativity is not a personality trait. It is a biological response to challenge. Remove the challenge, and the response disappears. Struggle is not a flaw. It is the process. So what do you do with this knowledge? You reintroduce friction on purpose. You limit inputs. You slow down outputs. You give yourself problems instead of solutions. You write without shortcuts. You compose without presets. You sketch without erasing. You think before you generate. These are not punishments. They are invitations. Each limitation is a doorway. Each obstacle is a teacher. This is not about talent. It is about discipline. And discipline is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not feel dramatic. It simply shows up. You have a choice. When you feel stuck, you can escape or you can stay. Staying is where creativity lives. Neuroscientists call this productive struggle. Educators see it in learning. Artists feel it in their bones. The moment when you want to quit is often the moment right before insight. This is documented in studies on incubation and insight. The brain continues working beneath awareness when a problem is held with effort, not avoided with distraction. Struggle is not a flaw, it is the process. Now soften your shoulders. Let your jaw unclench. This is not a call to suffer. It is a call to engage. Healthy struggle is focused. It is intentional. It has boundaries. You struggle with the work, not with yourself. When frustration rises, you do not judge it. You observe it. You breathe. You continue. This trains emotional regulation, another key component of creative endurance. The ability to stay present through discomfort predicts long-term creative output more than raw intelligence. Again, the science is clear. Now listen carefully. Original thought is born where effort meets patience. Remove either one, and it collapses. Struggle is not a flaw, it is the process. As this chapter closes, let this idea settle deep. You are not blocked. You are being shaped. The resistance you feel is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of growth. And there is wisdom in this that echoes far older than neuroscience. A quiet line reminds us that strength is made complete in weakness. Not avoided, completed. Hold that gently. You have a choice. To bypass or to build. Choose to build. Because creativity does not die from struggle. It dies from its absence. You have learned why ease dulls the mind. Now it is time to understand what truly sharpens it. You learned how creativity fades when resistance disappears. Now let's explore what happens when silence replaces noise. Chapter 7. Dopamine, Relief, and Learned Dependence. Here is the truth most people avoid. Relief is addictive, even when it costs you, not pleasure, relief. This matters. Behavioral science has shown this for decades. The brain does not only chase rewards, it chases escape. Escape from effort, escape from uncertainty, escape from thinking. That's the hook. You feel tension, you remove it. The brain learns fast. That's the key. Dopamine is not a happiness chemical. It is a learning signal. It teaches your brain what to repeat. Neuroscientists have demonstrated this clearly. Dopamine spikes most reliably not when pleasure arrives, but when discomfort ends. The removal of stress creates a stronger reinforcement loop than delayed reward. Relief is addictive, even when it costs you. This is how habits form, not through joy, through relief. You feel stuck. You reach for an instant solution. Tension drops. The brain marks it as useful. Repeat. Over time, the brain stops asking whether the behavior helps. It only remembers that it removes discomfort. That's how dependence is learned. And this is where low-friction tools change the equation. When effort disappears, so does agency. You have a choice. You can tolerate discomfort, or you can erase it. Most people erase it, because erasing feels productive. It feels smart. It feels efficient. But it trains something dangerous. It trains avoidance. Relief is addictive, even when it costs you. Research on reinforcement learning shows that behaviors followed by immediate relief are encoded more deeply than those followed by delayed rewards. This is why short-term coping strategies often outcompete long-term growth behaviors. The brain is not moral, it is efficient. It repeats what works fast. So when uncertainty arises and a tool instantly resolves it, the brain learns a rule. Don't think, offload. That's the loop, not pleasure, relief. Uncertainty disappears, effort disappears, the dopamine signal fires. That's the key. Over time, your tolerance for uncertainty drops. Your tolerance for effort drops. Your confidence erodes quietly. Because confidence is built by staying with difficulty, not by removing it. You don't need their permission to struggle, but dependence convinces you that you do. It whispers, why wrestle with this when you can skip it? Why wait when you can resolve it now? Why strain when you can outsource? And each time you agree, something weakens. Not your intelligence, your discipline. It's not about ability, it's about discipline. The science is blunt. Studies on learned helplessness and cognitive offloading show that when people repeatedly rely on external systems to resolve tasks, their internal problem-solving confidence decreases. They feel less capable even when their ability hasn't changed. That's not convenience. That's conditioning. Relief is addictive, even when it costs you. Now hear this carefully. Dependence does not feel like addiction. It feels like efficiency. Addiction looks dramatic. Dependence looks reasonable. That's why it spreads so easily. The brain is rewarded not for creating, but for avoiding effort. And avoidance always expands. You start by skipping the hard parts. Then you skip the thinking. Then you skip the attempt. Eventually, you feel blocked without knowing why. You have a choice. You can interrupt the loop, or you can reinforce it. That's the key. Interrupting the loop does not require quitting tools. It requires restoring friction. You must reintroduce effort on purpose. Here's how. First, delay relief. When uncertainty appears, wait. Count to 60. Write down what you think the answer might be before checking. This simple delay weakens the dopamine association. The brain learns that relief is not immediate. Second, struggle out loud. Explain the problem to yourself before outsourcing it. This activates prefrontal circuits responsible for reasoning and self-trust. Studies on metacognition show that verbalizing uncertainty increases retention and confidence. Third, cap convenience. Set rules, not moods. rules. It's not about comfort, it's about discipline. No instant answers for first drafts, no shortcuts for foundational thinking, no relief until effort has been invested. You don't need their permission to do this. Your brain will resist. That's expected because relief trained it to. Relief is addictive, even when it costs you. But here's the reversal. Effort creates a different dopamine pattern. Slower, deeper, more stable. Research on effort-based reward shows that when dopamine is tied to completion rather than escape, motivation becomes self-sustaining. You stop chasing relief. You start trusting yourself. That's the transformation. You are not giving something up. You are taking something back. Your tolerance for uncertainty, your capacity for effort, your authority over your own thinking. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. And discipline compounds. Each time you stay with discomfort, the brain updates its model. This is survivable. This is manageable. This is mine. That's the key. Relief shrinks you. Effort strengthens you. One makes you dependent. The other makes you free. You have a choice, short relief now, or long strength later. Choose deliberately, because what you repeat, you become. And there is an old truth that mirrors this science with unsettling accuracy. When you endure, you gain life, not by escape, by perseverance. Let that land. You have now seen the mechanism. How relief trains dependence, how avoidance steals confidence. Now it's time to reclaim something deeper. You've learned how dopamine chains behavior to comfort. Now let's talk about what happens when you remove the noise entirely. Chapter 8, you are training yourself to wait. Here is the quiet damage no one warns you about. Waiting becomes your default, not resting, not planning. Waiting. If you wait for prompts, you stop initiating. That's the pattern. At first, it feels harmless. You check before you act. You ask before you start. You wait for confirmation, but the brain learns rules quickly. And the rule it learns is this: do nothing until instructed. That's the key. Behavioral science has measured this effect. Reaction time and initiative studies consistently show that when people rely on automated cues, spontaneous action declines. Not because ability disappears, because initiation is no longer practiced. You don't lose capacity, you lose readiness. If you wait for prompts, you stop initiating. This is not a motivation problem, it's a conditioning problem. Initiative is a muscle. What you don't use weakens. Neuroscience backs this up. Voluntary action is coordinated by frontal striatal circuits that strengthen through self-initiated behavior. When decisions are externally triggered, those circuits fire less often. Less firing, less strength. That's the key. Over time, hesitation creeps in. You feel capable, but you don't start. You know what to do, but you pause. You're not lazy. You're trained to wait. If you wait for prompts, you stop initiating. Automation creates comfort. Comfort creates passivity. Passivity erodes agency, and agency is everything. You have a choice. You can act without permission, or you can wait for direction. Waiting feels safe. Initiating feels risky. But growth has always favored the risk. It's not about intelligence, it's about discipline. Studies on learned passivity show that when individuals repeatedly defer action to external systems, their likelihood of initiating independent behavior drops significantly. Even when they are fully capable, that's not failure, that's learning. The brain learns what is expected of it, and if the expectation is wait, it complies. That's the key. Think about how this shows up. You don't open a blank page. You look for a template. You don't begin a task. You look for guidance. You don't trust your first move. You wait for validation. If you wait for prompts, you stop initiating. The danger is not that you'll do less. It's that you'll stop believing you can start alone. Confidence is built at the beginning of action, not the end. Every time you initiate without help, the brain records a win. I can begin. Every time you wait, the opposite is recorded. I need direction. That's the loop. And loops compound. You don't need their permission to start, but the habit of waiting convinces you that you do. Reaction time experiments have shown that people exposed to frequent external cues become slower to respond when cues are removed. Not slower in reflex, slower in choice. They hesitate. Hesitation is the signal of learned dependence. That's the key. This is why the most dangerous question is not what should I do? It's should I start? The moment you ask that, you've already delayed. If you wait for prompts, you stop initiating. Now listen carefully. Initiation does not require certainty, it requires decision. You don't start because you're sure, you become sure because you start. That's the reversal. But waiting flips that order. It says, be sure first. And certainty never arrives. You have a choice. You can train initiative back into your system, or you can continue reinforcing hesitation. Training initiative is simple, not easy, simple. First, start before clarity. Choose one task per day that you begin without planning it perfectly. 5 minutes, no tools and no prompts. This restores the brain's expectation that action comes first. Second, set initiation rules, not goals, rules. I start at 9, regardless of readiness. I begin with what I know, not what I'm missing. Rules remove negotiation. That's the key. Third, tolerate imperfect starts. Research on action bias shows that people who initiate quickly outperform those who wait for optimal conditions, even when early steps are flawed. Initiation beats precision at the beginning. It's not about flaw, it's about discipline. Discipline means starting without permission. You don't need their permission. You don't need certainty. You don't need reassurance. You need motion. If you wait for prompts, you stop initiating. But when you initiate, something shifts. The brain updates its belief. I can act independently. That belief spreads. Initiative in one area increases initiative everywhere else. This is supported by behavioral transfer studies. Self-starting behavior in one domain increases confidence and action in unrelated domains. Momentum is transferable. That's the key. Waiting kills momentum before it exists. Now hear this. Most people think they're stuck because they lack motivation. They're wrong. They lack initiation. Motivation follows movement, not the other way around. You don't feel ready, then act. You act, then feel ready. Waiting reverses the sequence and freezes you. If you wait for prompts, you stop initiating. So stop waiting. Not forever. Now, start before you agree with yourself. Start before confidence arrives. Start before comfort. You have a choice. And the cost of not choosing is training yourself to hesitate. There is an ancient principle that aligns perfectly with this science. Do not withhold good when it is in your power to act. Power begins at initiation. You have now seen how waiting is trained, how hesitation replaces action, how prompts steal initiative. You reclaimed effort. You reclaimed struggle. Now you reclaim starting. But there is one final layer, because even when you act, noise can drown you. You learn to begin again. Now let's talk about what happens when you remove the constant input entirely. Chapter 9. This is not intelligence. It is delegation. Let's clear something up. This is not intelligence. It is delegation. That's the key. A tool extends you. A substitute replaces you. Say it again. A tool extends you. A substitute replaces you. When you confuse the two, you don't become smarter. You become absent. You have a choice. You can use tools to amplify your thinking, or you can hand your thinking away. Most people don't notice when the shift happens. It's subtle. At first, you ask for help checking an idea, then you ask for help shaping it, then you ask for help starting, then you wait, and one day you realize you didn't think at all. That's the key. Cognitive science is very clear on this distinction. Tools that require active engagement strengthen cognition. Substitutes that remove engagement weaken it. Research on cognitive offloading shows that when people delegate memory, reasoning, or decision-making to external systems, their internal capacity for those tasks declines over time. This is not because the brain is broken, it is because the brain is efficient. What you stop doing, your brain stops supporting. That principle has been proven repeatedly in neuroplasticity research. Neurons that fire together wire together. Neurons that do not fire weaken. It's not about flaw, it's about discipline. Discipline determines what you keep alive. When you let a system decide, summarize, judge, or generate for you, you are not learning. You are outsourcing. And outsourcing thinking trains dependency. That's the key. Let's be precise. Using a calculator does not make you bad at math. Using it before you understand the math does. Using navigation does not make you incapable of direction. Using it without ever orienting yourself does. The problem is not tools. The problem is substitution. A tool asks something of you. A substitute removes the demand. You have a choice. Are you extending your mind or replacing it? Studies on learning and recall make this distinction painfully clear. Recognition feels like knowledge. Recall is knowledge. When you read fluent output, recognition lights up. You feel familiar. You feel certain. But when you try to explain it without the system, nothing comes. Because recognition was mistaken for understanding. That's the key. Psychologists call this the fluency illusion. Smooth information feels true, even when it was never yours. The brain mistakes ease for mastery. And when that ease comes from an external system, you absorb the confidence without earning the competence. This is why people feel informed but cannot think. This is why certainty increases while judgment declines. You don't need their permission to think slowly. You don't need instant clarity. You need friction, because friction is where thinking happens. Problem-solving research shows that struggle activates deeper neural networks associated with transfer, abstraction, and creativity. When the struggle is removed, those networks go quiet. That's not intelligence, that's delegation. And delegation always comes with a cost. The cost is agency. Agency is the feeling that I can figure this out. Once that feeling erodes, confidence collapses, and the system becomes the authority. That's the key. Studies on locus of control show that reliance on external authorities shifts people from internal to external control orientation. They stop trusting themselves. They start waiting for prompts, waiting for confirmation, waiting for answers. If you wait for prompts, you stop initiating. You see the pattern. This is not about morality, it's about mechanics. The brain adapts to roles. If your role is requester, you become passive. If your role is thinker, you become sharp. You have a choice. Every time you reach for an answer, ask one question first. Have I tried to think this through myself? If the answer is no, stop. That pause matters. Research on metacognition shows that even brief self-attempts before assistance dramatically improve learning and retention. Trying first is not wasted effort, it is the training. That's the key. Here are the rules. Rule 1, never outsource first thought. You may refine later, you may check later, but you must initiate. Rule 2, explain before you read. If you cannot explain it in your own words, you do not understand it. Rule 3, use tools to test, not to decide. Let them challenge you, not replace you. This is how tools stay tools. Once they decide for you, they stop serving you. They shape you. And systems that shape you without accountability are dangerous because they don't live with the consequences. You do. You don't need their permission to trust your judgment. You don't need perfect answers. You need ownership. Ownership of thought. Ownership of error. Ownership of growth. That's the key. There is a quiet lie people believe. If something helps me, it must be good for me. Not true. Some things help short-term and hollow you out long-term. Relief feels like progress. Delegation feels like intelligence. Neither are. Intelligence is effort directed well, not effort removed entirely. Discipline decides which one you build. And there is a simple ancient truth that aligns perfectly with this science. Test everything. Hold fast to what is good. Testing requires judgment. Judgment requires thinking. You cannot test what you did not engage with. You are nearing the end now. You've seen the patterns: dependence, relief, delegation, withdrawal. The final step is reclaiming authority, not rejecting tools, but putting them back in their place. You mastered withdrawal. You saw the illusion of intelligence. Now comes the final return, the return to judgment, the return to agency, the return to silence before decision. That's the key. You are no longer asking, what should I think? You are asking, what do I decide? And that changes everything. You reclaimed your mind. Now it's time to reclaim your direction. Chapter 11, the return to authority. Chapter 10, the withdrawal is the proof. This is where most people quit, not because they are weak, but because they misunderstand what discomfort means. They feel unease. They feel restless. They feel uncertain. And they assume something is wrong. They are mistaken. Discomfort means recovery has begun. That's the key. Psychological dependency is not revealed when a tool is present. It is revealed when it is removed. When removal creates anxiety, hesitation, or agitation, dependence is exposed. This is not opinion. This is behavioral science. Studies on habit formation and extinction show that when a reinforcing stimulus is removed, the brain produces stress signals. Not because the stimulus was necessary, but because the brain adapted to its presence. The discomfort is not damage, it is recalibration. Discomfort means recovery has begun. You have a choice. You can interpret discomfort as danger, or you can recognize it as proof that something had too much control. That's the key. When people stop any low-friction dependency, the same pattern appears. Increased irritability, mental noise, a sense of something missing. Neuroscientists call this prediction error. The brain expected relief. Relief did not arrive, so it protests. Not because you need the behavior, but because the brain hates surprise. Research on dopamine prediction error shows that when an expected reward is removed, dopamine activity drops below baseline. This creates discomfort. Not craving for pleasure, craving for certainty. That's important. You are not missing pleasure. You are missing predictability. Discomfort means recovery has begun. This is why quitting feels hard. Not because life is worse, but because the brain is relearning how to operate without shortcuts. It's not about flaw, it's about discipline. Discipline is staying present while the brain recalibrates. You don't need their permission to feel uncomfortable. You don't need reassurance. You need understanding. That's the key. Look at what happens during withdrawal. You hesitate more at first. You doubt yourself. You feel slower. This is temporary. Cognitive load studies show that when external scaffolding is removed, perceived effort increases before efficiency returns. The brain is doing more work again. Work feels heavy when you haven't lifted in a while. That doesn't mean you're weaker. It means strength is returning. Discomfort means recovery has begun. Most people misread this phase. They think, I was better before. They weren't. They were numbed. Relief masked the cost. Instant relief always charges interest later. That's the key. Behavioral economics has demonstrated that humans overvalue immediate relief and undervalue long-term autonomy. This is called hyperbolic discounting. You chose relief yesterday, you pay with discomfort today. But today's discomfort buys tomorrow's freedom. You have a choice. You can pay the price consciously or keep paying it unconsciously forever. Discomfort means recovery has begun. Let's be precise. Withdrawal does not mean panic. It does not mean collapse. It means sensitivity. You are feeling signals you muted before. That's progress. Studies on attentional restoration show that when constant external input is removed, internal signals become louder before stabilizing. Thoughts feel intrusive. Silence feels noisy. Then clarity returns. If you quit too early, you never reach that phase. That's the trap. You stop at the doorway and conclude the house is empty. It isn't. You just haven't let your eyes adjust. That's the key. So what do you do during withdrawal? First, name it. Say it clearly. This discomfort is expected. Labeling reduces threat response. Neuroscience shows that naming sensations reduces amygdala activation. You calm the brain by explaining the process. Second, shorten the horizon. Don't think in days and think in minutes. Research on urge surfing shows that cravings peak and fall within short windows when not acted on. You don't need forever. You need now. Third, replace relief with action, not distraction. Action, movement, writing, building, deciding. Action restores dopamine through effort-based pathways. That's the key. Fourth, refuse interpretation. Do not assign meaning to discomfort. It is not a message about your ability. It is not evidence of failure. It is chemistry changing. You don't negotiate with chemistry. You wait it out. You have a choice. Every time discomfort appears, you can read it as loss, or you can read it as evidence. Evidence that dependency is loosening. Discomfort means recovery has begun. This is why the withdrawal phase matters more than the decision. Anyone can decide to stop. Few can stay stopped long enough to feel normal again. Normal without crutches, normal with agency. That's the reward. Longitudinal studies on habit cessation show that confidence increases sharply after the discomfort phase passes. Not before. Confidence is earned after endurance, not before. That's the key. You don't need their permission to endure. You don't need comfort to continue. You need clarity, and clarity comes after the storm. There is an ancient truth that mirrors this science. Endure hardship as discipline. Hardship is not punishment, it is instruction. You now understand the final illusion. That withdrawal is a sign of loss. It isn't. It is the sign that something false is leaving your system. You faced dependence. You faced hesitation. You faced relief addiction. Now you face the proof. And when the discomfort fades, what remains is you. Unassisted, initiating, present. You didn't lose anything real. You reclaimed yourself. You mastered withdrawal. Now there is only one question left. What do you build with your recovered mind? Each one should test their own actions, and then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else. Galatians 6:4. You have been listening to How to Quit ChatGPT Before It's Too Late, written by Lewis Wilson, narrated by Brian, and produced by Audio Antiqua Productions, exclusively for Spotify audiobooks. God bless you.